etc. Hopefully anyone that's joining a few minutes late will be online by the time we get to the more important parts of the reason you all come to be with us this evening. So thank you everybody for your time this evening and for investing that time in finding a little bit more about the John Monash Scholarship and what the expectations are from the application process and how the reviewers will see these applications. Hopefully quite a few of you would have joined us for our last session several weeks ago, which was around the general information about the scholarship. I won't be covering any of what Anna Bailey covered in that session in any detail, but we will do a quick recap before we get underway. On screen there you have our newly minted 2024 John Monash Scholars, and one of those scholars, Nick Falstead, is on our panel this evening. Thanks Nick for joining us. If I can, let me just see, why is my screen not advancing? That is curious. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a glitch for some reason. Let me just relaunch that. I'm just going to reboot it from there. There we go. I think we're off and running. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're coming this evening from Naarm in Melbourne, and we're in the Kulin Nation on Wurundjeri country. I'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land that we come from this evening, but also acknowledge the lands on which you're all joining us tonight as well. And we pay our respects to the traditional custodians of these many lands and their elders past, present and emerging. As I said, this evening we're joined by 3 John Monash scholars. Maddie Smith, who's online. She's a 2023 Bob Holk John Monash Scholar. Nick Mora, who's a 2023 BHP John Monash Scholar. And Nick Falstead, who, as I mentioned, is a 2024 brand new scholar, Victorian Government John Monash Scholar. And they'll tell you a little bit more about their journey and share some tips and tricks with you later in the evening, and they'll also be here to help answer some questions towards the end. I'm also joined this evening by the CEO of the John Monash Foundation, Mr. Paul Ramage. Paul, thanks for coming on tonight. Paul will also be on the chat line and jumping in with me to talk and highlight some particular parts of the application we think you should really focus on. And I'm the Executive Director of the Leadership Academy. The foundation is different from many other scholarship foundations in that we provide support to our scholars in an ongoing way throughout their career, and we do that through what we call our Leadership Academy. So thank you all. As I said, I won't be covering off on that general information in great detail. It is all available on our website, as is a recording of webinar 1 for anyone that missed that. You can just go to johnmonash.com and follow the scholarships links and you'll find that information. Tonight, what we'll do is a quick recap of the scholarship. We'll have a look at the actual application form and highlight some sections to you. Then you'll hear the tips and tricks from our panel of scholars that have joined us this evening. And then there'll be a Q&A session at the end, which will, as I said, we'll be jump in depending on who is best placed to answer your question. Either the scholars or the management team will be answering that. Just ask that you keep your microphones off during the session. Towards the end, when we're having questions, if you put your hand up, you can open your mic and ask that question. But feel free also to put questions in the chat as we go, and we'll try to get to some of those as we go if somebody doesn't jump on and answer that in written form. So just a reminder, why are we the General Sir John Monash Foundation? Well, it springs from the legacy that was left behind by Sir John. He was a very strong advocate for the power of education. And this quote here on screen, the privilege of education carries great responsibilities. It is given not for individual benefit alone, but to befit persons for the higher duties of citizenship and for roles of leadership in all fields to make Australia great. And that quote captures really the essence of what will be looked at in the application. The beliefs of Sir John are reflected very much in the applications, each of the areas of merit that will be looked at. So that's why it's very important that you do look at those. So those three areas are excellence. You obviously need to have demonstrated outstanding results in your university degree to date, or if you've completed that your overall grades were good at completion. The panels will also look at other areas of excellence, such as prizes, awards, publications. Then the area of leadership is very important in this scholarship. So demonstrated leadership experience or potential for leadership in a field of study or professional environment or in the community. Then what we call citizenship, or this sense of giving back to the community. So have a clearly identified career pathway and show how you are going to contribute to Australian society. So that is a really big part of the application as well. And you have to tick all three of these boxes. Just a quick reminder on some of the eligibility. You need to be an Australian citizen. This is a scholarship for postgraduate study overseas. And you must be looking, if you're applying in this round, you are looking to go overseas the following year, so in 2025. If you're not ready to travel for study in 2025, then withhold your application till the year before you are. You will need in your application to be able to really argue the merits of the chosen course, the master's or the doctoral program that you're proposing, and the institution that you wish to go to, and why they are best positioned to drive the progress that you want to see in your desired field of study. And of course, as I mentioned, you also need to be able to demonstrate a clear commitment to benefiting Australian society and leadership of others. To give you an idea of roughly how the selection process will play out when the applications close on the 1st of July, we'll have several hundred applications coming in. It fluctuates a little bit from year to year. There'll be then a first cut review by at least 3 reviewers, and those applications will be taken down to 100 applications that will go through for first round interviews, which will be held at state level between August and September. So about 100 applications get to that stage. They're further whittled down to about 40 applications, which will go up to the national panels, which are held in Sydney and Melbourne. And we bring scholars into those panels. And then around 10 to 20 John Monash scholarships will be awarded, and that those offers will be made in November. Last year, just as an example, 16 John Monash scholars were awarded their scholarships. So it is quite a rigorous process by online reviews, state panels, national panels. I do want to spend just have a quick look at the online application. I know many of you have already started your applications online. For those that haven't, when you go onto our website, you'll first need to register for an account and then log in. And then you'll be taken through some pre-qualification questions just to make sure that you are eligible before you go any further. In blue on the screen, there are the major sections of the application. And I'd like to have a little look at those with you, just to highlight, so Paul and I can highlight to you some of the sections that we think are particularly worth you looking at. And just bear with me while I jump into that particular area. Okay, so I'm in the live application system that you see on screen there. You'll note, for those that have been in, there are a lot of instructions, the online instructions as part of the application. So there's not a separate application instruction booklet, for example. It's all online. It's all where you need it, right inside the application. So just be aware of that. Make sure you read those instructions very carefully, so that you are giving the reviewers what they want. When you're in the online system, you will have this dashboard that you now see on screen that covers separate sections such as applicant information, academic experience, professional experience, etc. Because I don't want to go in and out of all of those, I'm actually just going to bring up a preview version of the application. Why is that not preview? No, that's going to go back in, just bear with me. There we go. The preview application. So this is not the way that you will see it when you're actually filling in, but it allows us to just quickly run through some of the sections. So the applicant information section, that's just about you, your details, your contact details, etc. Just some basics about you. There's nothing really for us to highlight that's specifically relevant there, except just be aware that there are two questions where you're asked to make a personal statement as part of that. When you're online, you'll also see that there are word limits for some of the questions, so just be aware of those. I think many applicants will probably start by drafting the responses offline and then pasting them in, but just be aware there are a couple of brief personal statements in the first section. Then you need to outline the details of the proposed study program that you're intending to do. So, and when you're picking what your program is, remember that you've got to be able to argue the merits of why that course, and why that institution. How is that going to equip you to make a contribution to leadership and within the Australian context? So think carefully about the programs that you want to do, and maybe our scholars this evening can tell you a little bit about why they chose the programs that they chose. So you put that in. Now, there is space within the application to select more than one option. Just be aware that even the scholars that get through, they may not get into their first choice. It's not automatic when we're not asking people to have been accepted into programs before they apply. That usually happens afterwards. So just be aware of that. Have a plan B. It's always good to do that, and then you can articulate the rationale for that in your application as well. I do want to draw your eye to the section around budget. Now, you are required to put in a budget. There's a budget template when you're in the application. The reason we're drawing your attention to this is the scholarship will provide $80,000 per year, depending on the number of years you're studying, but this is really a contribution towards your education. In most cases, that won't cover the full cost of your tuition, your living expenses, etc. So you do need to think carefully about how you are going to be able to juggle your own finances to do that. Are you applying for an auxiliary scholarship? Is this partially being supported by family, for example? So you do need to really think carefully about, is the contribution that comes from the foundation enough for you to be able to do the program that you've chosen based on the current tuition fees? So please do give a lot of thought to the budget. That is very carefully looked at by the assessors. You do have this rationale, as I said, about why you have applied for the proposed course of study. So you do have to put that justification in there as well. And just remember that in terms of commencement dates, it doesn't matter when you commence the following year, but it must be the following year. So those, as I said, those applying this year are going to be leaving at some point during 2025. Because a lot of scholars are going to the Northern Hemisphere, that usually ends up being around the middle of the year. There's some questions there again around in terms of budget, will you be intending to apply for other support mechanisms? So carefully think that through and be prepared to list your answer there. The next section of the application is about your academic experience. So that's really just a summary of study to date if you haven't finished. And if you have finished, then it's covering off each year of your study, as well as uploading your final transcripts, etc. There's also a section for your secondary education to give us an idea of when you finished high school. So that's all very straightforward. Then there's a section on your professional experience, and you will be asked to upload a 1 to 2 page CV within that component of the application. But you will be then making statements around your professional achievements, any professional awards that you have, and there's a space to add additional information such as publications or exhibitions or major works that you've done, so that those can go in there if you haven't already mentioned those elsewhere in the application. We then move into a section, again, that's quite focused around your personal statements. So in relation to leadership, engagement, or citizenship and impact, these are very, as I said, these are very core to the selection criteria. So you'll be asked to give examples of where you've demonstrated leadership, either in your professional life or elsewhere. You'll be asked to talk about the potential to reflect leadership qualities, and that those qualities are Officer General John Monash, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And tell us a little bit about you. What do you know, what makes you tick? What do you love to do outside of your study and your professional activities? And why do you enjoy doing that? So the panels will be really interested in finding out about the genuine you. You then explain the study, why you've chosen the course. So this is your justification for why this course, why this institution, and how is that going to benefit you and Australian society. And then telling the reviewers what you see as your career trajectory. How do you envisage this educational experience then helping you short, medium and long term in the path that you want to go with your career, and how that will contribute to Australian society. And then there are two questions specifically around that, what we're terming citizenship, so how you are actually going to do that and make a difference through your career and the learnings that you have through the scholarship opportunity. And an important part of our community is the John Monash Scholars. The word family is often used when people describe their connection with each other. And so we do want to hear about how you think you might be able to contribute to that growing community of John Monash Scholars, and ways that you might benefit from that community. So we're really interested in hearing about how you envisage yourself working within our community. Those are the key points from the application. Paul, was there anything you wanted to add in terms of highlighting sections of the application before I move on?
No, I think that's very good, Karen. I probably just at this point touch on the type of questions. The chat room's now active. Suddenly I do have a sense we have dozens and dozens of people out there, so welcome to everybody. Themes came up in the first webinar as well. Your references, probably best to think of them as narratives, 1 or 2 pages from these key people. They know you very well. Ideally, they can talk across your life. So academic, keep in mind, academic, leadership, citizenship. The more your referees hit those selection criteria, the better. Budgets, it's very important to kind of give clarity around your forecast expenditure and your forecast income if you need it, and where other sources of incomes will come from. So it is a budget. It's not just a cost centre. So we are looking for a budget, and we're probably really looking for a strong sense that you understand what a budget is. And one thing that's very, very important in this space is to understand, at least have an appreciation of the different costs, like the likelihood of different costs in different parts of the world. So for those who have an interest in the United States, keep that in mind, that the cost can be higher than in other parts of the world, and you may need supplementary income, or you may want to have an initial approach to your preferred institution about waiving fees or getting some certain exemptions. I'll leave it there and I will return to questions, but otherwise keep those questions coming. We'll do our best to answer them. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just jump back to my my slide deck. For those of you that joined us for the first webinar, Anna did run through some general tips and tricks for the application. Just to recap, carefully read the instructions, as I said. Seek guidance from people. You may have mentors, parents, others that can help you. Some of your universities have prestigious scholarship teams and they can also assist you. So please see if you do have access to one of those if you're still enrolled. Allow plenty of time. It does sound like we've got nearly a month to run, but it is a lot of work to finish the application. Do note there's a very strict deadline of 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 1st of July. Be honest and genuine in your application. Make sure that you draft, test, repeat, etc. And I'm sure some of our scholars will have things to say about that. And make sure that you select your referees carefully. You have to put in 3 referees. We don't specify who they should be, but maybe our scholars can give you some advice. But obviously you need people that can speak to the 3 key things you're going to be assessed against. So your academic excellence, your leadership capability, and your ability to give back to Australian society. So think carefully about who your referees would be. And of course, proofread. But I am going to jump to our three scholars who are online tonight. And I might, for the scholars online, might go in just in order, do Maddie first and then Nick Mora, then Nick Felsted, just so they can give you a little bit of an idea about what it's like to go through this journey and succeed, and share any tips and tricks that they have with you this evening. So Maddie, if it's okay, I'll jump to you.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everybody. My name is Maddie. So I was fortunate enough to get the scholarship in 2023 and undertook a Master of Disaster Risk and Resilience at the University of Canterbury. And I had a background in policy and bushfire risk management before undertaking my master degree. In terms of the process, kind of like what Karen said, it does take a long time, and I did find myself reviewing my answers quite a lot, and asking for a lot of assistance in terms of idea bouncing off people and making sure that my narrative and my story really displayed the values that the foundation was seeking regarding that leadership excellence and community. And when it got to the interview stage, I think having spent that much time writing my application and knowing that narrative really well helped me out, because preparedness, I would say, is the key, and knowing your story inside and out and like truly believing it, I think that really helped. But all in all, it was a very enjoyable and pleasant experience, and I think I got a lot out of it. For getting the scholarship, but then I think it's also helped me in terms of making career choices and discussing ideas at university, and also knowing the pathway that I wanted to take.
Thanks, Maddie. I might jump to Nick Mora next to share some of his tips for you.
Sure. First thing I'll say is your name doesn't have to be Nick to be awarded a Monash scholarship. It does help, of course, but not required. So yeah, my name is Nick Mora, and I was awarded the BHP John Monash Scholarship in 2023. And as you saw, I'll be using it to do a PhD at MIT starting this September, which is, an amazing experience and something which, obviously you can only dream about until it starts to happen, and then you kind of start to pinch yourself. So my experience in applying for the scholarship was, I'll try and be as open and frank as I can. So I actually applied twice. In the first round that I applied, I made it to the national panel, and unfortunately didn't receive a scholarship. And so after that, I kind of had the choice to, continue on with other things in my career/life at the time. And then the next year came around, and I honestly hadn't planned to apply again, but when it got to, I think it was May or whenever the applications opened, I just thought to myself, you know what, I made it all the way to the national panel, why not give it another shot? And I'm so grateful that I did, and I knew deep down that it's something that I wanted to do. So because I went through the process twice, I got very familiar with the application, the questions, the interviews. And so I think the biggest things for me was, Maddie already touched on it, but narrative is huge. Making sure that your application isn't about ticking a box. There's no formula that you can apply that will, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get this outcome. But really it's about how you can convey your passion, your experience in such a way that you can convince those reading your application that that you're worth investing in, that you'll have the ability to impact in a certain area for the benefit of Australia. That can seem very overwhelming to try and do that. And so one other thing I would tip would say, be authentic. If you be true to what you have done, and don't try to talk about things or say things because you think it might look good, but be the best and most truest version of yourself. And I found, well, particularly for me, I found that when I kind of pulled away all the things I wanted to be able to look like, and in my second round to get down to that level where I I knew that no matter what, I wanted to pursue the field and the interest that I had. And if the John Monash Scholarship would enable me to do that, then, you know, of course, by all means, I was in. But for me, it was always about pursuing my passion. And kind of that switch really helped me to come in with more confidence and more courage in kind of my application. And that, you know, helped me, I think, a lot in the second round. And then the last, I guess, tip I would say is preparation. And so some things that I did, I took time, I actually read, well, this is going to sound like I'm a real nerd, but I read 2 biographies of John Monash. I actually read the first one, which was very short, like 100 pages. And I really enjoyed it. And so I actually wanted to read another one, a longer version. And so that for me was like a personal thing that I did because I knew, you know, that the John Monash, the man, it was good to learn about him. That helped me really understand, I guess, the drivers for the foundation. And so that's one thing that I did to prepare. I also did practice interviews with my wife. So I got her to like literally ask me questions in the evenings before the interview, and I would practice responding. And I did that for, you know, a couple of sessions of those before my interview. And once again, that just helped to clarify my narrative, gave me the confidence, you know, in my responses. And when it actually came to the day, I was saying things that I'd already said many times. And of course, they put you on the spot. They do ask you questions, which you can never prepare for. But, you know, for those core questions about why you want the scholarship, what you want to do with it, I was, you know, very confident in my responses. So hopefully that gives you some tips and tricks. You know, that all worked in my experience. And I guess I'll just, you know, close off by saying it's a real privilege to have the John Monash Scholarship. As Karen said, it does feel like a family. And there's a temptation to kind of look at all the previous scholars and be like, oh, they look so superhuman. But we all are very human. And, you know, we obviously are passionate about what we do. And so, yeah, I would encourage you all to, you know, put your best foot forward. And yeah, hopefully you might see some of you around in the future. So, yeah.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, there will be, as I said, opportunity to ask questions of the scholars at the end, but I'll throw to Nick Felstead too to chip in his additional tips and tricks, and then we can I'll finish up with just a few slides, and then we'll cut into the Q&A. Thanks,
Great,
Nick.
thanks, Karen. Yes, I'm another Nick Felstead, and I'm the 2024 Victorian Government John Monash Scholar. I'm originally from Perth, and I moved to Melbourne for my undergrad and then stuck around for my law degree. For the past few years, I've been working at the Australian Government Solicitor in competition policy, consumer law and tech regulation. And in a few weeks, I'm excitedly heading overseas to do a Master of Laws, and I'm going to look into how constitutional foundations of countries influence their approach to competition enforcement and tech regulation, which is all very exciting for me. So I thought I'd sort of break down my advice into 3 parts. First, the written application, second, the state interview, and then third, the national interview. So the best advice I can give for the written application is to start early. And I understand it's due in about 3.5 weeks. So if you haven't already started, get started. I had a Word doc just sort of constantly open on my work computer, where I would sort of just jot things down, any idea that I thought might be somewhat relevant. I would just put it in the Word doc and then later sort of construct it into a narrative. Along with starting early, I would definitely advise to submit early. So for my 3 referees, I gave them all a false deadline about a week before it was actually due, because I was worried that their calendars would fill up or something would go wrong. And of course it did. So I was very glad that I had a sort of 6 or 7 day buffer for one of my referees. And I understand that the servers can get a bit hectic in the sort of flurry of last minute applications. So do not do what I did and submit with a few hours to go, because you'll be in a bit of a state of panic. Other things on the written application, I found it a little bit difficult to write concisely, as you might be able to tell by the amount I'll be talking. And some of the questions, you only get like 200 to 300 words to explain your personal journey and what your interests are. And for me, I found that quite challenging. So that, again, that's why starting early is really important, because you can start cutting down from the mass that you have that you've collected over a couple of weeks. But then I think also doing those short answer questions is really good practice for the interview, because you have such limited time to convey the message that you're trying to get across. And then I think something that I also found a bit challenging at first with the written application, but then also came in handy for the interviews, is to just do away with any sense of tall poppy syndrome and really talk up your achievements. I think these sort of scholarships and applying for these scholarships is quite self-selecting, and you're all probably very ambitious and very accomplished young people. And this is just a really good opportunity to tell everyone on the panels and in the applications about your ambition and about your accomplishments. And then the last thing I'd say on the written application is, if you have any doubts or concerns about anything, just reach out to the foundation. Everyone there's super, super helpful, and I can't speak on behalf of them, but I'm sure would be pleased to help with anything that goes awry in the lead up to applying. And then on the state panel, I've got very short notes for this because I didn't do a whole lot of specific preparation for it, unlike the national panel, where I prepared tooth and nail for that. But I think one thing I would say to especially any lawyers that are thinking of applying for a Master of Laws, where, in my view, the university that you're applying for matters maybe a little bit less than if you were doing a PhD and you really want to work for one specific professor who's like the leading expert in chemistry or something. I felt a bit stumped with, why do you want to go to this university? So either have a very convincing reason why University A is going to be so much better than University B, C, and D, or be candid and say that for your area of study, any of these could be equally good for different reasons. And then I think, remember, for both the state and the national interview, that the panelists are going to be genuinely interested in what you're proposing, but they might not be experts in your field. So just moderate your language, and especially the use of jargon or any technical language accordingly. And then for the national panel, I assume it'll run similar to how it did last year, Karen, with a sort of presentation at the start and then questions. Yeah,
I think that's the plan.
Yeah, cool. So I was very lucky that I effectively had 2 weeks of annual leave booked in already in the 2 weeks prior to the national panel. So it meant I just spent those 2 weeks preparing and memorizing this presentation. That's the way I found it most comforting, to be able to memorize my 6 or 7 minute speech. But I think there'll be no problem if you have palm cards or notes that you need to read off. It's not a public speaking competition. And I think just think about the little things when you go into the interviews, especially for the presentation. Do you have anything that helps while you're public speaking? For example, I like to hold a pen just to help with sort of gesticulation. Will you sit down or stand up when you're doing the presentation? I remember asking a past scholar, what did you do for this? It seems like such a minor thing, but it can be sort of a bit of a cause of like questioning and stress. I chose to sit for what it's worth, because I thought it might be a bit awkward standing up and sitting down for the questions. Are you going to use slides? I didn't, because I thought it was the sort of thing where there's no harm in not having them, but some risk if you do have them and don't nail them. Same obviously goes for any use of humour. And then probably the more substantive thing is, how does your presentation convey the narrative that you want to get across to the panel? I think the best advice I can then give for the presentation and the Q&A itself is to think deeply about who you are, how you want to make an impact, and why you want to make an impact. Because I think that's what the panel are really going to be looking for, and that's what they can really sort of grasp onto when they're discussing who to select for the scholarships. Thanks, Karen.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. No, that's really insightful, because as I said when I was giving my part of the presentation, it's a very thorough process. The application is the first part, but for those that get through to the state and national levels, the interviews then obviously are a significant next step in that process to trying for selection. I'll just jump back into my presentation for a moment, just to remind everyone that we have lots of information on our website that you can find for yourself. I put the link in the chat for those that missed webinar 1. There's also an FAQ and some other written information on the website, so that is a good resource to go to. You can also, for those of you that don't already, you can follow us on social media. You might even want to join Monash Minds. That's our newsletter. You can find a link to register for that on the website as well, which will give you a better idea, more around the foundation, what we do, what our scholars are up to, for example. So that's that could be a good thing for you to have in preparation for your applications. I do want to open it to a general Q&A, and there is, I think Paul's probably got to most questions in the chat. If you feel you haven't had a question answered that you put there, or you have a question either for Paul or I as a part of the management team, or for one of the 3 scholars, you can direct it specifically, or we can hear from each of them on a particular question. But if you would like to ask a question now, I just ask you to use the raise hand function in Zoom, and then open your microphone and ask your question. But if you want to raise your hand, you'll come to the top of the queue, and then I can call your name and you can take off your mute button and ask your question. Jack Murray.
Hey, sorry, that was way quicker. I thought there was going to be some other people in the in the queue before me.
Hey, Jack.
I was just interested in Nick and Maddie. What do you reckon was the part of the application that you did that you felt was your weakest? Knowing that you're successful, there's a kind of interest for me in going, where is the part that you felt was the weakest, or where was the part you were anxious about?
Does anyone want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think for me, I really stressed over like the community engagement aspect. I was always questioning myself as whether I had, been impactful enough or had done enough in the community to, like, I don't know, be out there and doing great things. Because there are some scholars who, quite frankly, have done amazing things in the community. And, I was probably on the more academic side of things, and I had done some things, some outreach with educational programs and things like that. But yeah, that always kind of weighed on me a little bit. So for me, yeah, that was the section.
I'm happy to go next. I think mine was also similar to Nick's in that I had only been out of uni for 2 years. So one of the ways that I prepared and got to learn more about the foundation was listening to all of the previous scholars podcasts, which I would highly recommend to get to know what other people have done before you and how their journey has been. But yeah, listening to what other people have done in the past and then reflecting on what I have. Obviously, you can't compare apples to oranges, and everyone has a different journey. But no, having the confidence to know that I had done enough to that point and also had a good enough vision for the future. I think it's always hard to have the confidence in yourself when you haven't had someone go, yes, like, you've done enough, you've got this, you can do it. But I did think that writing it down on paper and really fleshing it out and really backing yourself, and then having mentors and friends and family around to help that process and do a couple of proofreads, I think that definitely helped. But yeah, I would say similar to Nick's is more of the experience sided questions.
Yeah, Nick Foster, have you got something to add?
Yeah, I think 2 things for me. The first is I sort of kept questioning myself during the process, thinking, why would a scholarship panel give a lawyer money to go study the Constitution and competition law when they could give that money to scientists doing cool science things that I don't understand? So I think having had a look at the previous scholars that had been awarded the scholarships in similar fields to me definitely helped assuage those fears. And then the other thing that I think I was definitely a weak part of my written application, because I have it in front of me, is the bit where it says list any professional awards with a brief description, and it's completely blank. So if you have no professional awards because you're in a field that doesn't, have that many, don't stress too much about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good trip. You don't need to tick. That's it. You don't have to have everything in every box. That's true. It's the assessor's going to look for a well-rounded individual. Beth, I think you were next with your hand up.
Hello. So sort of a question for all the scholars who have generously spoken about their experiences. I guess I'm reflecting as I'm listening to this. I'm both filled with excitement, but also a bit of trepidation as well. And it is reminding me of when I was applying for my Masters of Clinical Psych, because that is a competitive course, and it feels very akin to this, where a lot of people applying for a small number of places. But I guess I wondered, how did you guys cope with the emotional side of the application process? And I guess Nick, Maura, that was quite a long-term process for you in the end. So that's, talking about perseverance there. But yeah, I guess I think that's a big one for me, and possibly a lot of other people may be feeling the stress or the anxiety around this.
I can jump.
Do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that's a really great point, and it is really real. Kind of like even thinking about it now, it really takes me back. It is an emotional journey. There's no doubt about it, because you're deeply questioning yourself, and yeah, it is very up and down. So I totally want to just acknowledge that for a lot of people doing the application, it can be very taxing emotionally. But I think for me, like I said, it was a long process for me. And I think, like I said, I just kept on coming back to what I wanted to do. And as the failure made me reflect on that more. Well, it wasn't a failure, but I guess, initially not getting it made me reflect on, I guess, in greater depth why I wanted it in the first place. And I kind of came back to the fact that, I wanted to do this study, and I was passionate enough to give it another go. But that was a long process, admittedly, to kind of come back to that. But yeah, it's not easy, and but you're always well supported, I would say. The foundation will always be there to support you. And I don't think if you are feeling the weight of it, reach out to them, chat to them. They can help allay some of your fears and just kind of settle the emotions a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of my advice as well.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, we are happy to talk to people. Can I also add that for those that aren't successful, there is a feedback window where applicants get feedback. Not many foundations do that. We strongly believe that we should provide feedback, because if you're a strong applicant, we would like to see your application again. Maybe this wasn't just the year for you. Maybe you need a few more years to bolster your CV and come back. But we do provide that feedback. A lot of organisations don't. Maddie or Nick Felstead, did you want to weigh in on the emotional side of how you dealt with the application?
Happily. And thanks for raising that, Beck. I think that's a huge part of the challenge of the application, is processing all your emotions and trying to make sense of it all and putting it on paper. And I found myself in those 2 months quite vulnerable, because I'd never thought about all of those things in such an exact and precise way. And then moving it on to the next step of having to submit it to people to then be judged, I guess, on what I had done. So yes, I definitely found those 2 months quite taxing emotionally. But due to other things happening, like with work and stuff, this was almost like a golden light at the end of the tunnel, and that I really wanted to do my postgraduate studies, and that was something that really drove me. And I'm so fortunate to have received the scholarship, because there was no way I could have supported myself to do the postgraduate studies if I didn't get it. And I think that going through that hardship of putting the stuff on paper and really challenging myself to think deeply about it was worth it, but in no means was it easy. But now that I'm here, I think it has helped me, like I said previously, kind of map a path out for myself and understand myself better. And in a way, I was able to have better discussions with the people around me, and chat more openly about the questions, not just for the application, but just to make sense of it all. So if you have people around you that you can talk to about the questions or about what you want to do and what you believe in and what kind of person you are, I think that made it easier, because I don't know if anyone could do this process alone. And I don't think it's meant to be done alone. It's meant to be done with the community around you, because that's really who you're going to be serving at the end of the day. It's the impact back to Australia. So yeah, take care of yourself while you do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice from the scholars there. Just in terms of order, I'm going some people are having some technical issues. I'm going to go to Emma, and then Tenzin, then I'll go to Alyssa, to Genevieve, and then back to Jack. So just so you know, I'm not skipping, it's just because some people are having other issues. So Emma, you're up next.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I'm feeling really hopeful and excited about this process. I have a slightly different question to the others, and it's about how Monash basically chose their affiliated unis, and whether certain unis are, it's hard to put this into words, will be favored. Like if I plan to go to a uni or a country which is not so well loved right now, will that put me at a disadvantage?
Paul, you might want to weigh in on this one as well. Emma, I'd say, look, no, we're genuinely open to all disciplines, any postgraduate qualification, any country. You have to make that rationale for why that course, why that institution is right for you. I would sort of caution that by saying also, we would ask, you should be looking at things like DFAT advice to countries that you're travelling to. We have a duty of care, obviously, you're our scholars. If you get through. So we want to make sure that people are safe. We genuinely do have a strong sense of community and family with the foundation. Paul, is there something else you'd like to add to that?
No, I'd really just confirm Karen's comments there as well, that Emma, thank you very much for the question, and we would want to support you in your choice. If the world at the moment has some tensions, it always does. So you wouldn't be the first person who had stuck their hand up to say, I do want to go to this part of the world. But, to get to the point where we're talking about risk assessment, it would come towards the end of the process. So the first thing is you would go in like everybody else, and it's about the academic, the leadership, the citizenship, how you can present your desire to create impact. And then we would talk, if necessary, about any risk assessment on the choice. So it is an open program, and it's a reminder too of the beauty of the John Monash Scholarship. You can be any age, you can study any discipline, and you can go to any part of the world. The question that comes at the end of your process, Emma, is probably just that sort of, talk to us a bit more about that. And we as a foundation, we do like to think of ourselves as a family, a community. We care deeply for those in the field, and so we would make our own risk assessment as well. But we are doing that constantly. It wouldn't surprise anybody on this call that includes current scholars in the field, and some of those scholars have been on campuses where it's been quite difficult to be on that campus, and so we've been reaching out to them, and we see that as part of our duty of service. I hope that helps, Emma.
Yeah, I'm really touched and relieved to hear that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. Tenzin, I think you were next.
Yes, hi. I had a question to the scholars about how you went about answering key criteria that you maybe don't have as much experience in. Like I think, Nick, you mentioned, I am still studying, so I don't have much professional leadership experience. And yeah, I was wondering how you went about conveying like your ambition or potential to achieve in those areas that you maybe don't have as much experience in.
You'd like to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Rich Nick.
I think, as I said before, so with the professional awards thing, I literally just left that blank, and clearly it wasn't too much of an issue. I think there wasn't anything else that I was super concerned about in that respect, but I think just being candid about the reason why you might be, I don't know, lacking in professional experience because you're still at university and you've had an opportunity to have professional experience. I think as maybe Karen or Paul or someone I'm sure has said, they're not just, the Monash isn't just looking for demonstrated leadership, but potential for leadership. And I would imagine the same goes for the other various facets of the scholarship.
Yeah. And it's, I guess, relevant to opportunity. We recognise, because we don't discriminate by age, you know, some scholars or scholar applicants will have come through quite straight after or immediately after their undergraduate degree, and others may have had 8-10 years of work experience. So you won't be treated differently. It's how, for the stage of your career, that relative to opportunity that will be looked at by the assessors. Maddie or Nick Morris, did anyone else want to sort of add to that in terms of academic profession?
Could I jump in there, please, Karen, just to round out, sorry to jump in over the scholars, but I wanted to kind of reinforce a clear point to our potential applicants, and that is, and I'll give you sort of real situations. If you make it through to a state or territory panel, you'll be very warmly greeted before you go into the panel discussion. Either myself or Karen or one of our colleagues will come out and we will greet you. And we'll probably congratulate you as well for getting through to that point to start with. And our purpose will be to ensure that you're chilled out, you're ready to come in and meet some people. First point. Second point is you will meet people who've been there before you. That some of them, that all of them generally have been scholars and university graduates. Some of them won scholarships and studied overseas. And so they have immediate empathy for you. And they're not, none of the questions are designed to be harsh, but they are questions that try to get to the heart of the matter. And so, but I guess my point is it's a friendly environment, it's a family type environment, and they're pleased for you. They're actually really pleased for you that you've made it to this point, and they just want to hear your story. So in all of these things about weaknesses, how to prepare everything else, I think Karen made the comment, be yourself, be genuine, express your passion and explain what you'd like to do. It's going to go a long way, a really long way. And we'll do our best to knock the nerves out of you as well when we meet you. So I hope that's helpful.
And also, just to add to what Paul said, I found the interviews shockingly unintimidating compared to a lot of other like job interviews or other things of that nature. I think they do a really good job in sort of calming the nerves.
Thanks, Nick. Might move on to the next question, just in the interests of time, because there's still quite a few questions. Just in line in terms of the chat, I said that Alyssa would go next. So Alyssa?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I was just after some advice on referee selection. I know we're supposed to have a variety of referees, and yeah, I'm in a situation where I've picked 2, and just in my third one, I'm really carefully weighing up like what exactly we want to see covered. And I think this particularly came to light because we had earlier in the chat that narrative is really important. And as I think about who might be my referees, it's also their ability and their communication style, like in drafting a narrative. And I guess like I'm weighing that up against like factors like if I've previously studied, do you want an academic referee? Do they have to be my current supervisor? Like how long have we known each other versus selecting someone perhaps like an inspirational mentor that you've known for a shorter period of time, but and yeah, I guess just there are any key people definitely need in there. And I guess the narrative question is sort of at the forefront of my mind as well. Like what if someone has known us very well, but we just know that they're not a narrative type style person? Like we've got a lot of potentially like more academic referees as well. Just any sort of strategic advice around referee selection and what we want covered would be helpful.
I might just jump in first and say just remember the 3 selection criteria and make sure that you are picking referees that can speak to those. Now, maybe not all 3 referees can speak to all aspects in great detail and provide an extensive narrative about that, but on balance between the 3 referees, they should be able to cover off on each one of those areas. So make sure that you haven't picked a referee or left a referee off that can speak to, for example, to your leadership far better than another. The scholars might have some advice on terms of how they picked their referees. Did anyone have a specific strategy about who they picked?
For my referees, I had a professor who I worked quite closely with at university. And so we had quite a good relationship together. And then my other two were my current boss and then my previous boss. But because the work that I did for both of those jobs was so different, I felt that they were able to describe different parts of me or different skills that I had demonstrated. But I'm sure the other people might have picked other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, for mine, I had a professor that I worked closely with and had studied directly under. So that sort of ticked off all the academic things that I thought were necessary. I had a boss from the government solicitor who I thought would be able to speak to leadership and my specific area of interest. And then the third person, I had the judge that I was working for last year, because they had studied overseas and done a similar course 1,000 years ago. So I figured they'd be able to speak to the specifics of that. But also in the referee process, you have no idea what the referees are going to write. So it should be people that you trust and that you trust know you well enough to dedicate their time to write a nice reference letter for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's a few sort of questions that the referees are asked, and then they attach a 1 to 2 page letter outlining, why they think you're suitable against the selection criteria. So that's a good point. Nick Mora, did you want to ask and just jump in with in terms of who you picked as your referees and why?
Yeah, just quickly. I actually chose three professors for my referees. I worked with all 3 of them in various, essentially writing papers and research, and they knew my passions and interests better than anyone. So that's the route I took.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thanks, Alyssa. Ash, I think I had Genevieve next, and then Jack, and then Jason. Jack asked to revisit a question. Genevieve.
Thanks so much, guys, for talking. It's been really insightful. I just had a question about post-studies. Do you guys plan to immediately return to Australia? I guess I'm asking in relation to the giving back element of the section, because I know once you're overseas, opportunities really do arise and it is tempting to stay. And yeah, I just wanted to know how you guys framed that in your application and what you were thinking.
Did you want to take that one first as someone that's sort of a bit further along in terms of the pathway?
Sure. So I finished my master's degree last year, and I'm still in New Zealand, and I'll be here for another month. But part of my Monash scholarship was me talking about how I wanted to get experience in New Zealand as a country with similar systems to Australia, but at a more local regional approach. This is a disaster risk lens, but then to best benefit Australia for what I want to do in my career, I wanted to get a better understanding of the international space and to get an understanding of the best practices out there with boots on the ground. So I will be going to the UK in September and getting a bit more experience over there, and I'll be trying to learn as much as I can. But ideally in the next 5 years, my plan is to be back in Australia and doing what I love. But that was incorporated into my scholarship, and I've been fortunate enough to follow that plan so far. And I was quite open with the panel and was able to justify why I wanted to move. I think I said a global hub at the time, and I think I gave Tokyo, London, and Barcelona as examples. We've managed to land on London. But yeah, at the end of the day, coming back to Australia and bringing that knowledge with me for the purpose of making the Australian community better.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks, Maddie. And Nick are yet to go out, but just in terms of, looking at our scholars more broadly, yes, not all do return. Most do, and some do, like Maddie, decide to stay overseas for a couple of years to get some work experience in the immediate area that they've been studying. And that particularly happens with those that are following academic career pathways. So that does happen. But as Maddie sort of gave us a suggestion, if that's what you see, describe that in your application, and then how do you see that in terms of your longer term career trajectory? and how you're going to give back to Australia. Some of our scholars live overseas and they are still contributing to Australia. It's not always based on the geography of where you live. You could be in foreign policy, for example, and many of our scholars are located where they need to do what they're doing because of their career, but they are still providing contributions back to Australia. Jack, we'll go to you because I think in the chat I said we'd come back to you.
I'm so sorry. I was not prepared to be called upon so quickly. It was more of a follow-up question. I think a couple of you in the sort of process talked about listening to podcasts of people who had talked about previous disciplines who sort of achieved the scholarship and had talked about that process. And this is kind of a question for both the scholars and the foundation, what if it's a discipline the scholarship has never funded in its history, at least online? What is the line that you follow there?
Maybe we'll take that one from the foundation first. So as Paul said, we don't look at discipline. We're sort of blind to that, if you like. So maybe we probably have seen whatever you're asking for. It does have to be an existing postgraduate program, but it is genuinely open. But you have to articulate why that program, why that institution, and how that adds benefit to your career and to contribution to Australia. Paul, is there anything you'd add on that one?
It really goes back to the advice the scholars have given, that one of the best things you can do is go and have a look at the people who just got scholarships. So have a look at the 2024 scholars and you'll find an avant-garde contemporary filmmaker, you'll find a composer who gave all of us goosebumps in the Nationals, and yet you'll still find a robotics engineer, a mathematics expert, people like Nick Felstead in law. And we didn't go to those national panel discussions with anything in mind. We were just meeting people and understanding their passion and their ability to deliver the impact that they wanted to do. So, Jack, we would keep a very open mind in terms of whatever you pitched as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And Jason, I might take you as the last question, given the time.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
All good, yep.
So I guess for any masters or in the field that I'm going into, there's a course content study component and then there's a research component. For the university that I'm going to, in the discussions I've had with some of the academics, I was told that the specific research that I'm interested in pursuing would only be able to be completed at a partner university. So that's possibly something that they could set up, but then I guess for the second half of my degree, be not transferred. I'd still be enrolled in the first one, but I'd be going to the second one, which is like an hour or two away. Is that okay?
So just to be clear on that one, would you be transferring your enrolment, or often research is done, I myself during my PhD, I did research at 2 other universities, but I was still enrolled in my primary university, but it was equipment and procedure based. And so yes. I chose to do that elsewhere, but I kept my enrolment. So would you be switching the enrolment between the university, or just that the access to the supervisor would come from another university?
Yes, yeah, the latter is correct.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear Paul's reflections. I'm not sure if we've had one like this. I'd say generally I think that would be okay. But just bearing in mind, if that supervisor isn't an employee of the primary university you're seeking to enrol through because of the coursework element, you just want to make sure that that is well and truly shored up. Because if you're picking a course in an institution that cannot supervise a research project that you've chosen, and there's not a plan B if that supervisor falls through. So I would say you want to make sure that that was definitely locked in, that supervisor was really committed and understood that that this is, in terms of de-risking your application, it's really important.
I was told that I have a supervisor at each university, one at the home one and one at the one that I was doing research at.
Yeah, that's not unusual for research supervisors to be at multiple institutions, just as long as they've been cleared by the primary institution and that you're sure that they're available and willing. Would you be successful? Yeah. All righty. I think that probably covers it. As I've said, if there are other questions, you can email us at our info@johnmonash.com email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. There's also our FAQs on the website, and webinar 1 is already up. We will be posting this webinar as well once we get that edited and online. So thank you everyone for investing your time tonight to hear a bit more about the John Monash Scholarship and the processes that we have in place. We look forward to seeing your applications very soon. But in the meantime, if you have questions, do reach out. Thanks all.